talk about warm temperatures, cattle producers and those in the midst of calving season would sure appreciate having some of those over the next week. Talking about calving season, let's talk about vitamin A and its importance. As our newborn calves enter the world, it's crucial to keep a close watch on their vitamin A levels. After all, this nutrient plays a pretty pivotal role in building a strong immune system for young calves. Market Journal's Bill Dodd is here with this story. Bill?
Newborn calves are at a great risk of vitamin A deficiency, in large part because they're basically born without any. Newborn calves are highly dependent on the colostrum from their mother's milk to help fortify that particular nutrient. This will be a very important part of their early development until that calf can consume other varieties of feed.
And so that's kind of the main challenge in our spring calving systems is we're often calving before those cows would be on a diet that would be very high in vitamin A, because fresh green grass, it's a really great source of vitamin A, but hay and brown forages like dormant range or corn residue is actually quite low in vitamin A, so she doesn't have as much vitamin A in her diet, so she can't put as much in the colostrum.
When trying to fortify the colostrum of a mother cow for newborn calves, using feeds and supplements will be an inevitable step. However, this will need to be done at a specific time before calving ever takes place.
If we think about fortifying the cow to make sure the calf gets enough vitamin A in the colostrum, then we really need to think about making sure her diet has enough vitamin A in it during late gestation. So the last 3 months before pregnancy, they actually start forming colostrum, during those last 2 months. And so we typically say, okay, the time to really start focusing on vitamin A is really in those last few months before she's going to calve. And so we suggest that's where you really need to make sure that you are supplementing the cow, especially if she's on forages that are not fresh and green. So, if I have a fall calving cow, it's a whole different story because she's going to be grazing fresh green forages at that time. But in our spring calving cows, a lot of them would be either still on stalks or coming off of stalks during that time, or they might be being fed hay. And while green hay does have some vitamin A precursors in it, it probably only is about 50% of the requirement. So we suggest that even with green hay, you need to be supplementing vitamin A.
One of the most common supplementation programs would be the use of free choice mineral. And the biggest thing to keep in mind with this type of supplementation is the fact that you will need to provide a very concentrated amount.
So we typically suggest that if they're on green hay, that we need to supply about 50% of the requirement, which is usually somewhere around in this late gestation for the calf, right? It's not for the cow's requirement. In fact, her requirements are actually fairly low. So she can get by and actually bore a live calf with very little vitamin A. The problem is that the calf will not have the epithelial integrity that it needs, and so they'll usually get diarrhea or respiratory disease. And it's usually very early, like the first 2 weeks of life. That's a common symptom of vitamin A deficiency. So what we suggest is in that free choice mineral, we want to provide, if she's on green hay, we want to provide about 50,000 international units per day, which in a 4-ounce mineral, which is a kind of a typical mineral intake, you got to multiply that by 4. So 200,000 international units per pound would be what you'd be looking for on the tag. If they're on brown forage, so either the hay isn't very green, or they're on dormant range, or they're on stalks, then we actually want to go for 75 to 100,000 international units. So either 300,000 international units per pound in the mineral, up to 400,000 international units per pound. If you're doing pellets, some people might actually fortify a pellet and be feeding pellets if you need some protein supplement for those cows. Then, of course, just remember what your total target is. If I was like feeding a pound a day to a cow and I wanted 50,000 international units per day, well, 50,000 international units per pound. That works pretty easy.
In addition to choosing the right mineral supplement, it's important to make sure that all cows have access to it and that it's always available. Making sure you're providing enough supplementation for your cattle during late gestation could help ensure that your calves get off on the right hoof after calving. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.